Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman, Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, April 7th, 2017. I am taping this one ahead of time once again. Didn't want to leave you in the lurch. Have a lot to catch up on, of course, and any day that we're off the air just means we fall further and further behind. It's Friday, and I love to use Fridays for these strange stories, esoteric stories, sometimes not even overtly political stories, but this time we're going to stick to political stories, of course, which are always our favorites. But Friday is also a good time to dig into long reads that otherwise either just eat up too much time for a busy week when the news is changing, but also pre-recorded shows. It's hard to predict what the news is going to be. This is a great opportunity to dig into some of these things that I think they're long reads, as I said, but essential background for the fast-moving world of Trump mania, I guess. Stuff that I have been holding on to for a little while and always really wanted to run back to, and more stuff piles on top of that. This time, though, I think we can spend the day taking a look back at Steve Bannon and the weirdness that surrounds him. And, of course, more proof for the theory, and we'll reiterate the theory again, that Stephen Bannon is very, I mean, he's had a great year by any measure. But it occurs to me, and you know we discuss it all the time on the show, that almost everything that he holds up or that others hold up about him, purporting to show him to be a political genius, appears to have all been paid for by the Mercer family. So I thought today would be a good day to look back not only at Steve Bannon and his own weird circle of influence, but also the Mercers, because again, the material has been piling up on all of these people, and we've gotten bits and pieces of it, but maybe today we'll spend some extra time concentrating on it. It's hard to believe how much there is out there, and this isn't even going to be all of it, but it will. Well, I'll tell you this right now: if you have no interest somehow, if you have an interest in this show and no interest in Steve Bannon, his weird background, and the Mercers, and whatever the hell it is that they may be up to, I don't know what you're doing here. But indulge me today. We'll be back with a recorded show. Well, we'll be doing a couple of recorded shows over the next week or two. There's a lot of traveling. It's spring break for the kids. But we'll try and fill out the picture with all the things that are floating around in the back of my mind, but we might not have yet articulated, or we haven't gotten all of the details on. So, I don't know. Find a comfortable seat, hang on, and let's get started. I've been meaning for some time to get back to the subject of the Mercers, Robert and his daughter Rebekah Mercer, who just seem to have connections to everything, but in particular to a lot of things that have contributed to the impression among the political media and politics watchers that Steve Bannon is capable of anything. I mean, we all know he's capable of anything, but that he's capable of anything political, that he's some kind of political genius. We've kind of gone over the theory a little bit in the past, that it seems to me like all of the things that he points to, or that people point to when discussing him, to establish as fact that he's someone who has any idea what they're doing politically, or is some sort of political genius and belongs in the White House along with Donald Trump. Almost all of those things have been financed by the Mercers. And it struck me as a little bit strange. And the other day I saw a tweet go by from Chris Zubak Skis. Who is Chris Zubak Skis? I don't know. I like that his name. You should combine them. It should just be Zubatsky. But okay. Anyway, Chris Zubak Skis, it says in his profile, is a news developer. Interesting title. At Public Eye. That would be the Twitter handle, public letter I, for the Center for Public Integrity, or at least the investigative journalism arm of the Center for Public Integrity. And we've read a number of their pieces in the past, and I think it was under their umbrella that we read those great pieces about the black lung funds that had been manipulated by both the coal mine operators and the bar operating on their behalf. Anyway, they've always done good work, and this tweet that I saw go by grabbed my attention. It said, "How many ties can a White House strategist, Steve Bannon, have to a billionaire conservative, Mercers? This many." And it was actually promoting their piece. A new database details the White House's officials' finances. The Center for Public Integrity makes disclosures searchable and sortable. And I opened up the link there. Essentially, they took the new info that was coming out of the White House. All of the financial disclosures were recently filed, and we haven't had a chance to discuss that, and that's a rich field, no doubt. But I wanted to just start with this piece that the Center for Public Integrity put together in the course of making these disclosures searchable and sortable. And, this is really interesting. The piece is actually just bylined the Center for Public Integrity. But I wanted to thank Chris for bringing this one to my attention. And it starts this way, the article. On last Friday night, that would be, the White House began releasing financial disclosures for scores of key employees, including familiar names such as Press Secretary Sean Spicer, Counselor to the President Kellyanne Conway, and Chief Strategist Stephen K. Bannon. Reporters from dozens of news organizations, including the Associated Press, the New York Times, ProPublica, and the Washington Post, then compiled and reported on these documents, which the White House released one by one. The Center for Public Integrity compiled the data from those disclosures into a searchable, sortable database, which is linked in this article, and you can take a look at it yourself and see what mischief you can make with it. But the database, which provides a window into the wealth, assets, and business interests of many of the people closest to President Donald Trump. The Center for Public Integrity's news developer, Chris Zubak-Skis, extracted these details from more than 90 reports released in PDF format using a software tool he created. And there is a link to that tool as well, or at least a description of that tool, the PDF parser. Very interesting. And I'll bet a lot of you could do a lot of damage with something like that. You can search the database or download it for yourself right here in the article. Within the disclosures are new details on Bannon's web of financial ties to billionaire Republican megadonor Robert Mercer and his daughter Rebekah. The Center for Public Integrity first published a graphic showing such ties in October, but Zubak-Skis has updated the graphic to show more connections. And it's tough to describe because it's a graphic, and it has a picture here, though, of Robert Mercer and a picture of Rebekah Mercer with an arrow between them, indicating that Robert is the father of Rebekah. And then from there, it's a bunch of circles and arrows in a paragraph on the back of each connection, you see. A bunch of arrows from each of them describing the nature of the transaction and to where it's going and the various organizations that they fund and the various organizations that Steve Bannon draws income from. And we'll go this way. Let's see. There is Robert Mercer first. And we should, I guess we're going to have to kind of Google along as we go and figure out what are some of these organizations, because it's not immediately apparent to me every time. But let's see. The first one on the list here is Make America Number One, a PAC that Mercer contributed some tremendous amount of money to. Let's see if I can look at that. $15.5 million to Make America Number One, which is kind of gross sounding if you're childish like I am. It is a PAC. I'm looking it up on Wikipedia here. It's a super PAC at that supported the presidential campaigns of Ted Cruz and later Donald Trump in the U.S. presidential election. During the primary campaign, the super PAC was known as Keep the Promise One, and I know we've discussed that weird layering of several PACs with the same name but just labeled with Roman numerals at the end. Keep the Promise 1, Keep the Promise 2, Keep the Promise 3. I forgot that those were Mercer operations. In the general election, the Wikipedia article continues, it informally termed itself Defeat Crooked Hillary PAC. The PAC is run by Rebekah Mercer, the second daughter of its largest donor, Robert Mercer. So anyway, let's take a look at the rest of the chart here, and we'll Google some other things. $15.5 million to Make America Number One. Make America Number One then paid more than $5.7 million of those dollars, or some number of dollars anyway, or somebody else's dollars. It's all fungible, but $5.7 million goes from Make America Number One to, you'll never guess, Cambridge Analytica. How weird. Now, Robert Mercer has also reportedly, according to the chart, invested $5 million in Cambridge Analytica, and that's not even counting the $5.7 million that he gave to Make America Number One and then sent to Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica, in turn, of course, paid Stephen K. Bannon as former vice president, what else is here? Vice President, Secretary, part owner of Cambridge Analytica, $125,333 made its way to Stephen K. Bannon's pocket. That's a lot. That's a lot of reduction along the way. But just, look, interesting play here. Mercer gives $15.5 million to Make America Number One. Make America Number One gives $5.7 million to Cambridge Analytica. Cambridge Analytica gives $125,000 to Stephen Bannon. And that's not even including the $5 million direct investment in Cambridge Analytica. Make America Number One had another investment on the chart, though, and that is a payment of more than $968,000 to Glittering Steel, which probably also rings a bell in your mind, but just to refresh your memory, it's definitely something we've spoken about here on the show with connection to Bannon. It's another one of his production companies, and it is I don't remember who it's or what productions it is responsible for turning out, but there are a couple of articles about it. Here's one from the Daily Beast. Glittering Steel I'm still in the Google search here. Glittering Steel is a very low-profile movie production company that has made ads for pro-Trump and pro-Ted Cruz super PACs. That may be all we need to know about them. But once again, the path here, $15.5 million from Robert Mercer to Make America Number One. $1 million from Make America Number One to Glittering Steel to produce pro-Trump ads. And ultimately $167,500 to former chairman and part owner of Glittering Steel, Stephen K. Bannon. Now there's more. Robert Mercer also has reportedly invested $10 million in Breitbart News Network. Of course, you know the connection between Breitbart News Network and Stephen K. Bannon. But the new piece of information here is that $191,000 of the $10 million Robert Mercer invested, quote-unquote, invested in Breitbart News Network, went directly to the pocket of Stephen K. Bannon. So from Robert through one or more intermediaries, we have, let's do the math here. The financial disclosure form would have maybe totaled this up for us, but $167,500 via Glittering Steel, $125,333 via Cambridge Analytica, and another $191,000 via Breitbart News gives us $483,833. I don't know over what period of time. From Robert Mercer to Stephen K. Bannon. But probably more important is the $15 million that went to make America number one, that turned into $1 million to Glittering Steel, the brilliant, genius, low-profile movie production company owned by the political genius who can do no wrong, Stephen Bannon. The $5 million Robert Mercer gave to make Cambridge Analytica look like a genius data processing, data mining operation at the with political genius Stephen K. Bannon at the helm, as well, vice president anyway, and part owner. And then, of course, you can't leave out the sheer genius that made Donald Trump what he is today, Breitbart News Network, which always hit the nail on the head with its super accurate reporting. $10 million from Robert Mercer into the Breitbart News Network that also made Stephen K. Bannon look like a political genius. He can do no wrong. Now, there's another path, by the way, to Steve Bannon's pocket here. $33.1 million from Robert Mercer, too. This is not unusual. The Mercer Family Foundation, though, all of what we learned about the Donald J. Trump Foundation from David Farenthold in the past year, makes us wary of that. But along the way, the Mercer Family Foundation made $3.6 million in grants to the Citizens United Foundation, the very same Citizens United of Citizens United, the Supreme Court decision, which of course opened up the floodgates of dark money. Somewhere along the line, though, Citizens United Foundation decided to spend money on its own fundraising, even though it could have been getting just $1 million chunks from billionaires in their evil underground lairs. They paid $300,000 to a fundraising operation to raise money for them in 2012, $300,000 fee, which went to, you'll never guess, Stephen K. Bannon, fundraiser extraordinaire. Amazing. Part of the $3.6 million in grants that went to Citizens United from the Family Foundation would, of course, perhaps have come from Rebekah Mercer, because she is a director of the Family Foundation. She's also a former director of the Government Accountability Institute, which got $2 million in grants from the Mercer Family Foundation, Rebekah being a director both of the Family Foundation and the Government Accountability Institute. The Government Accountability Institute, as I recall, is the operation that produced the film and book of Clinton Cash, the infamous book that somehow captured the imagination of leading newspapers around the country, including the New York Times, which gave it a serialized play and led to the most famous line of the entire 2016 presidential election campaign, but her emails. You see? Government Accountability Institute then turned around and paid $376,000 over 4 years to former executive chairman and co-founder of the Government Accountability Institute. Gosh, he's got his hands in everything. Stephen K. Bannon. How does he do it? Forget Hope Hicks. He's running Glittering Steel. He's running Cambridge Analytica. He's running Breitbart News Network. He's raising money for Citizens United Foundation. He's running the Government Accountability Institute. And Rebekah Mercer, as director, chair, and treasurer of Reclaim New York, got to know Stephen K. Bannon, who himself was a former director and vice chairman of Reclaim New York. And I think that's probably the least nefarious of the organizations on this chart. But just to get some kind of a fix on what it was all about, let's see. Should we? What have we got here? Is there a Wikipedia page? I can't. It doesn't look like it. Here's a piece in Politico that makes mention of it. Conservative nonprofit plans to expand statewide presence from May of 2015. And what mention do they make of Steve Bannon in this? This is interesting because this is from quite a while ago. And, May of 2015, Bannon wasn't on the campaign yet, and the Mercers were still backing Cruz, I think, probably at that point. Let's take a quick look at this. Just interesting. Politico, why you're interested in this. Conservative nonprofit plans to expand statewide presence. Dateline Albany. A nonprofit group tied to hedge funder Robert Mercer is planning to expand next month. Capital has learned. That's the column, I guess here. Reclaim New York, a 501c3 with connections to several prominent Republicans, was established in 2013 and has developed a sizable presence on social media websites like Twitter. Last month it was featured prominently in a Newsday editorial. According to its website, the group is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization dedicated to advancing statewide grassroots conversations about the future of New York, its economy, and its people. How interesting for Stephen K. Bannon, resident of California and Florida and London and Washington, D.C., but I guess also New York. He's going to reclaim it from one of those other locations, more than likely. Reclaim New York will likely be more visible in the near future. It's in the process of hiring 3 full-time staffers and interns and plans to release a groundbreaking report next month about affordability, according to its website. Blah, 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 blah. According to Tom Basile, the Reclaim New York senior advisor. Reclaim New York's website lists 4 general policy areas on which it focuses: affordability, education, jobs in the economy, and government reform. It has criticized a variety of specific issues, including the recent tax break for yacht purchases, taxpayer-funded ad buys to promote Startup New York, and the scaffold law. Huge problems, obviously. Filings submitted by to the IRS last year list 6 directors, each of whom has connections to the Republican Party or conservative causes. Basile was a lightning rod of controversy, quote-unquote, during his tenure as executive director of the state Republican Party that ended in 2011. Stephen Bannon, the group's vice chairman, is a radio host for Breitbart News. That's it. That's all they say about him. Leonard Leo is a former George W. Bush appointee who is currently executive vice president of the Federalist Society. And Lawrence J. Moan, M-O-N-E, is president of the Manhattan Institute. That at least makes some sense. Mercer's daughters, Rebekah and Jennifer Mercer, serve as treasurer and secretary, respectively. Robert is a reclusive Long Island financier whom the New York Times recently identified as likely the main donor behind a network of 4 super PACs supporting Ted Cruz that reported raising $31 million just a few weeks into his campaign. Good job with that one. And that's really about it. I mean, they're only mentioned in passing, or even the Mercers, much less Steve Bannon, who's identified only as a radio host for the Breitbart News Network, not the chairman or CEO or anything like that. Interesting. So, let's see. In addition to all of this web of relationships that are put together, I thought it might be interesting to go even a little further back into Pocket and pull up some of the other profiles of the Mercers and kind of what they've been up to all this time. Alrighty then, so how about a super long read from Jane Mayer at The New Yorker? That's always a good idea. This one, the reclusive hedge fund tycoon behind the Trump presidency. How Robert Mercer exploited America's populist insurgency. Why not? What a great place to start. Last month, when President Donald Trump toured a Boeing aircraft plant in North Charleston, South Carolina, confusing, I know, he saw a familiar face in the crowd that greeted him. Patrick Cadell, hey, former Democratic political operative and pollster, who for 45 years has been prodding insurgent presidential candidates to attack the Washington establishment. After his having had a turn at it, I guess he wanted to burn the ladder after him. Hasn't done all that well with it, but okay. Cadell, who lives in Charleston, is perhaps best known for helping Jimmy Carter win the 1976 presidential race. He's also remembered for having collaborated with his friend Warren Beatty on the 1998 satire Bullworth, which changed everything, of course. In that film, a kamikaze candidate abandons the usual talking points and excoriates both the major political parties and the media. Voters love his unconventionality, and he becomes improbably popular. If the plot sounds familiar, there's a reason. In recent years, Cadell has offered political advice to Trump, who, of course, has been doing the exact opposite with it that Bullworth was supposed to have been doing in the movie. But never mind all that. The point is, outsider, and so therefore okay with me. He has not worked directly for the president. That would mean Trump there. But at least as far back as 2013, he had been a contractor for one of Trump's biggest financial backers, Robert Mercer, a reclusive Long Island hedge fund manager who has become a major force behind the Trump presidency. It is amazing, by the way, how Pat Caddell finds himself always finding, well, I mean, it's one thing to be an outsider and to promote outsiders, and I'm all for that. What's amazing about him is his tremendous skill in finding billionaire outsiders who can pay him a tremendous amount of money to promote their brand of outsiderism. It's amazing how many billionaire outsiders there are out there. And, I don't have any skill in finding them and convincing them to pay me tremendous amounts of money. You gotta tip your hat to Pat Caddell on that. During the past decade, Mercer, who is 70, has funded an array of political projects that helped pave the way for Trump's rise. Among these efforts was public opinion research conducted by Caddell showing that political conditions in America were increasingly ripe for an outsider candidate to take the White House. That's also amazing. Caddell, who really believes that an outsider should take the White House, was able to produce public opinion research showing that political conditions in America were increasingly ripe for his pet project to become true. That is amazing. No wonder he got paid the big bucks. Caddell told me that Mercer, quote, is a libertarian. He despises the Republican establishment, and added he thinks that the leaders are corrupt crooks and that they've ruined the country. That's amazing, because I think he's a corrupt crook who's ruined the country. Well, Trump greeted Caddell warmly in North Charleston, and after giving a speech, he conferred privately with him in an area reserved for VIPs, like outsiders, and for White House officials, including Stephen Bannon, the president's top strategist, and Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, who I guess is slowly pushing Stephen Bannon out the door, hopefully all the way at some point. Caddell is well known to this inner circle. He first met Trump in the 80s. People said he was just a clown, Caddell said, but I've learned that you should always pay attention to successful clowns. Yeah. Caddell shared the research he did for Mercer with Trump. Just coincidentally. I just have this research with me from the Mercers, and I don't know. I just thought I'd show you, because you're Trump. And he also, we shared it with Trump and others in the campaign because including Bannon, with whom he had partnered on numerous projects because they're so much alike. The White House declined to divulge what Trump and Caddell discussed in North Charleston, as did Caddell, but that afternoon Trump issued perhaps the most incendiary statement of his presidency, a tweet calling the news media, quote, the enemy of the American people, unquote. The proclamation alarmed liberals and conservatives alike. William McRaven, the retired Navy admiral who commanded the 2011 raid that killed Osama bin Laden, called Trump's statement a, quote, threat to democracy. The president is known for tweeting impulsively. By the way, I guess as a progressive, I just have to just stop for a moment here and say, if you want somebody who can define democracy and the threats to it properly, I would say start with the guy who killed Osama bin Laden. I'm glad Osama bin Laden is dead. I'm glad he was killed. I'm glad, in a way, that we killed him, but I don't know if that's necessarily super democratic. But, I don't have any complaints about it, really. In the end, I'm a pragmatic type person, but it's a little weird. The president, known for tweeting impulsively, of course, but in this case, his words weren't spontaneous. They clearly echoed the thinking of Caddell, Bannon, and Mercer. In 2012, Caddell gave a speech at a conference sponsored by Accuracy in Media, a conservative watchdog group. This former Democrat gets an awful lot of his work from conservative groups, doesn't he? In which he called the media, quote, the enemy of the American people. So no surprise there. That declaration was promoted by Breitbart News, a platform for the pro-Trump alt-right, of which Bannon was the executive chairman before joining the Trump administration. One of the main stakeholders in Breitbart News is Mercer. So you see kind of the layering going on here. Mercer is the co-CEO of Renaissance Technologies, which is among the most profitable hedge funds in the country. A brilliant computer scientist, he helped transform the financial industry through the innovative use of trading algorithms. Oh, and I think almost destroyed the world financial system probably at some point. But he has never given an interview explaining his political views. Although Mercer has recently become an object of media speculation, Trevor Potter, the president of the Campaign Legal Center, a nonpartisan watchdog group, who formerly served as the chairman of the Federal Election Commission, said, "I have no idea what his political views are. They're unknown, not just to the public, but also to the most people who've been active in politics for the past 30 years. Potter, a Republican, sees Mercer as emblematic of a major shift in American politics that has occurred since 2010, when the Supreme Court made a controversial ruling in Citizens United versus Federal Election Commission, and you know about his relationship with Citizens United. That ruling and several subsequent ones removed virtually all limits on how much money corporations and nonprofit groups can spend on federal elections and how much individuals can give to political action committees. Since then, power has tilted away from the two main political parties and toward a tiny group of rich mega-donors. Great for democracy, almost as good as killing Bin Laden, I guess. Private money has long played a big role in American elections. When there were limits on how much a single donor could give, however, it was much harder for an individual to have a decisive impact. Now, Potter said, a single billionaire can write an 8-figure check and put not just their thumb but their whole hand on the scale, and we often have no idea who they are. He continued, suddenly a random billionaire can change politics and public policy to sweep everything else off the table, even if they don't speak publicly and even if there's almost no public awareness of his or her views. Through a spokesman, Mercer declined to discuss his role in launching Trump. People who know him say that he is painfully awkward socially and rarely speaks. He can barely look you in the eye when he talks, an acquaintance said. Obviously, exactly the kind of person who can just go out there and drum up the business and get all the money sent to him. I have that problem. How come I can't get lots of money? I don't know. Some people manage to get a break, but I'm not a brilliant computer scientist, so he's got that on me. It's probably helpful to be highly introverted when getting lost in code, but in politics you have to talk to people in order to find out how the real world works. In 2010, when the Wall Street Journal wrote about Mercer assuming a top role at Renaissance, he issued a terse statement. I'm happy going through my life without saying anything to anybody. According to the paper, he once told a colleague that he preferred the company of cats to humans. Well, I prefer the company of cats to his existence, but okay, fine. We're even. Several people who have worked with Mercer believe that despite his oddities, and boy, it really does get a lot easier to smooth over your oddities when you're a billionaire and can pay people to look the other way, isn't it? Several people who've worked with him believe that despite his oddities, he has had surprising success in aligning the Republican Party, and consequently America, with his personal beliefs, and is now uniquely positioned to exert influence over the Trump administration. By the way, one other thing. Being a brilliant computer scientist with weirdo libertarian ideas and hating the establishment, that just makes you like the annoying comic book / IT guy. But add $1 billion and, you're an intriguing, reclusive, whatever. In February, David Magerman, I don't know, a senior employee at Renaissance, spoke out about what he regards as Mercer's worrisome influence. Magerman, a Democrat who is a strong supporter of Jewish causes, took particular issue with Mercer's empowerment of the alt-right, which has included anti-Semitic and white supremacist voices. Magerman shared his concerns with Mercer, and the conversation escalated into an argument. I'm right, you're wrong, get out. Magerman told colleagues about it, and according to an account in the Wall Street Journal, Mercer called Magerman and said, I hear you're going around saying I'm a white supremacist. That's ridiculous. Magerman insisted to Mercer that he hadn't used those words, but added, if what you're doing is harming the country, then you have to stop. After the Journal story appeared, Magerman, who has worked at Renaissance for 20 years, was suspended for 30 days. Undaunted, he published an op-ed in the Philadelphia Inquirer accusing Mercer of, quote, effectively buying shares in the candidate, unquote. I think he has it right. He warned, Robert Mercer now owns a sizable share of the United States presidency. Nick Patterson, a former senior Renaissance employee who is now a computational biologist at the Broad Institute, agrees that Mercer's influence has been huge. Bob has used his money very effectively. He said he's not the first person in history to use money in politics, but in my view, Trump wouldn't be president if not for Bob. It doesn't get much more effective than that. Patterson said that his relationship with Mercer has always been collegial. In 1993, Patterson, at the time a Renaissance executive, recruited Mercer from IBM, and they worked together for the next 8 years. But Patterson doesn't share Mercer's libertarian views or what he regards as his susceptibility to conspiracy theories about Bill and Hillary Clinton. During Bill Clinton's presidency, Patterson recalled, Mercer insisted at a staff luncheon that Clinton had participated in a secret drug-running scheme with the CIA. The plot supposedly operated out of, you know it, the airport in Mena, Arkansas. Bob told me he believed that the Clintons were involved in murders connected to it, Patterson said. 2 other sources told me that in recent years they had heard Mercer claim that the Clintons have had opponents murdered. This is now becoming even more interesting. I figured as much, obviously. But here's the improbable connection that my mind just created out of thin air between this story and a previous area of inquiry. You remember, of course, Gregory Watson, the star of one of the stories we discussed previously on the show. You remember the guy who got a bad grade, so he got the Constitution amended? Interesting, isn't it? Well, here is Robert Mercer, who through whatever channels and for whatever reason comes to believe the nonsense conspiracy theories about Mena airport drug running and that the Clintons have had people murdered. And for 20 years, we all thought he was crazy, but now he's got $1 billion and he'll show you he's going to fix it so that the President of the United States is out there endorsing these theories. He'll fix it so that his chief political strategist is the CEO of Breitbart News, which was probably the only outlet left that would ever give any kind of credence to any kind of nonsense like this. Gee whiz, how did we get to Pizzagate? Holy cow. We got a guy who for 20 plus years has been seething that people thought he was a conspiracy theorist nut about the Clintons and the murders surrounding them and the Mena airport drug running. And I'll show you all thought I was wrong. I'm going to fix it so that the establishment thinks I'm right, and you're all the crazy ones. We've been talking about Trump and gaslighting America. We had no idea how big this gaslighting operation was. I'm not crazy. You're all crazy. I'll redefine it on you, and I'll spend $1 billion doing it. Now I'll get back to the article. I don't know whether this is where it goes, but this is where it's taking me. But let's let Jane tell the story. The Mena story is one of several dark fantasies put forth in the 90s by the American Spectator, an arch-conservative magazine. And by the way, they hate conservatives. The Mercers, I hate the establishment. What's this one? I'll read this. According to Patterson, Mercer read the publication at the time. David Brock, a former Spectator writer who is now a liberal activist, oh my God, told me that the alleged Mena conspiracy was based on a single dubious source and was easily disproved by flight records. It's extremely telling that Mercer would believe that, Brock said. It says something about his conspiratorial frame of mind and the fringe circle he was in. We at the Spectator called them Clinton crazies. Even at the Spectator, who was publishing this stuff, they called them Clinton crazies. How interesting. And how amazing. David Brock, conservative activist turned liberal activist. Pat Cadell, liberal activist turned conservative activist. Oh my goodness. Everybody, I don't know what to make of this. They're all crazy. And I guess at some point, if you're rich enough, if you move in the right circles, ideology, left, right, doesn't matter. It's all about you. Patterson also recalled Mercer arguing that during the Gulf War, the U.S. should simply have, ready, taken Iraq's oil. Does that sound familiar? Since it was there. It's here, so I should take it. That's some kind of mindset. Trump, too, has said that the U.S. should have kept the oil. By the way, I mean, even he, as dumb as it is for Trump to say, well, we should have kept the oil, I don't know what the excuse was, because it's here. We should keep it. The excuse was, well, if we conquer the territory, we'll take what's in it, including the oil. And as awful as that is, as illegal as that is, by international law standards, if you care about such things, it's not quite as, I don't know what, disconnected from reality as, well, we should take the oil because it's there. I mean, I guess if maybe he meant, well, because it's there in land that we, conquered. But Since it's there, it's here for a reason. The reason must be for us to take it somewhere else. God put this oil here for a reason, and the reason is for people to take it from where God put it and bring it somewhere else and set it on fire. I don't know. It's no crazier than the rest of this stuff. Expropriating another country's natural resources is a violation of international law, Jane Mayer reminds us. Another one-time senior employee, by the way, at Renaissance recalls hearing Mercer downplay the dangers posed by nuclear war. Right. I don't want to talk to anybody. I hate people. So, with that in mind, nuclear war is not such a bad thing. Mercer, taking no heed apparently of the rest of the world, which doesn't mind talking to people at all. Mercer, speaking of the atomic bombs that the U.S. dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, argued that outside of the immediate blast zones, the radiation actually made Japanese citizens healthier. Oh my God. Are you sure he's a brilliant computer scientist? I mean, people say he is. Maybe he's programmed something fantastic, but I don't know. Again, poor person who believes this, street lunatic. Rich person who believes this, eccentric, reclusive billionaire. The $1 billion helps in being defined as a billionaire, but even take that away. Eccentric, recluse. Street lunatic, raving maniac. One needs hospitalization, the other one needs tissue boxes on his feet. But golly, that's endearing. He needs hospitalization too. The National Academy of Sciences has found no evidence to support this notion. Sometimes Jane overdoes the homework, but okay, we appreciate that one. Nevertheless, according to the one-time employee, Mercer, who is a proponent of nuclear power and nuclear explosions, I guess, was very excited about the idea and felt it meant nuclear accidents weren't such a big deal. Yay, make him president or give him a large chunk of the presidency. Mercer strongly supported the nomination of Jeff Sessions to be Trump's attorney general. I guess on the theory that racism actually makes black people healthier. It doesn't say that in the article, but I'm extrapolating. Many civil rights groups opposed the nomination, pointing out that Sessions has, in the past, expressed racist views because he's a racist. He couldn't help it. Mercer, for his part, had argued that the Civil Rights Act in 1964 was a major mistake. According to the one-time Renaissance employee, Mercer had asserted repeatedly that African Americans were better off economically before the Civil Rights Movement. Few scholars agree, they point out. So Japan benefited greatly. It made the atomic bombs made them healthier outside the immediate blast zone, and civil rights made African Americans worse off. So far, he's batting 1,000. He is a genius computer scientist. Let him run the country. He also said that the problem of racism in America is exaggerated. The source said that not long ago he heard Mercer proclaim that there are no white racists in America today, only black racists. Aren't you the real racists? Yeah. Mercer, meanwhile, has supported a super PAC, Black Americans for a Better Future, whose goal is to, quote, get more blacks involved in the Republican Party. That'll work pretty good. Well, it is the party of racists, and the only racists in America are black racists, so you might as well get a chunk of them to join you. Most people at Renaissance didn't challenge him about politics. They probably stayed away from him and preferred the company of cats to his company. They didn't challenge him about politics, Patterson said, but Patterson clashed with him over climate change. Mercer said that concerns about it were overblown. He doesn't seem concerned about anything. And why is he such a recluse if that's the case? After Patterson shared with him a scientific paper on the subject, because, remember, Mercer's a brilliant scientist, a brilliant computer scientist, right? Except, I guess you don't need the rest of science to be in computer science. So he showed it to him, and Mercer and his brother Randall, who also worked at the hedge fund because, meritocracy, sent him a paper by a scientist named Arthur Robinson, who's a biochemist, not a climate expert. It looked like a scientific paper, but it was completely loaded with selective and biased information, Patterson recalled. The paper argued that if climate change were real, future generations would, quote, enjoy an Earth with far more plant and animal life. Sure. I mean, No pattern here. Racism is great for black people. Civil rights are terrible for black people. Atomic bombs were wonderful for the Japanese. Global warming is good for you. I mean, what else? I hope he's got... I'd like to hear your theory on donuts and Doritos, sir. I'm very curious and very hungry. All right, so we'll all enjoy a Earth with far more plant than animal life. It'll be in the oceans, but it's true. I think he's right. Robinson owns a sheep ranch in Cave Junction, Oregon. And on the property, he runs a laboratory that he calls the Oregon Institute of Science and Medicine. Mercer helps subsidize Robinson's various projects, which include an effort to forestall aging. Okay, by surrounding yourself with sheep, I suppose. Interesting. I wonder if there's any connection anywhere in all of this to not Mercer, but Bannon's weird connection to the biosphere. I don't know. We'll find out. We'll read on. Patterson sent Mercer a note calling Robinson's arguments, quote, completely false, unquote. He never heard back. I think if you studied Bob's views of what the ideal state would look like, you'd find that basically he wants a system where the state just gets out of the way. I think more than that, I would guess. Patterson said, climate change poses a problem for that worldview because markets can't solve it on their own. Magerman told the Wall Street Journal that Mercer's political opinions, quote, show contempt for the social safety net that he doesn't need, but many Americans do, unquote. He also said that Mercer wants the U.S. government to be, quote, shrunk down to the size of a pinhead, unquote. Well, let's see. Come on over here, Robert. You're a pinhead. Let me take a look at the size of you. Several former colleagues of Mercer's said that his views were akin to objectivism, the philosophy of Ayn Rand. Magerman told me, Bob believes that human beings have no inherent value other than how much money they make. It's terrific. A cat has value, he said, because it provides pleasure to humans. But if someone is on welfare, they have a negative value. If he earns 1,000 times more than a school teacher, then he's 1,000 times more valuable, which is a great philosophy to have if you are earning 1,000 times more than most other people. Magerman added he thinks society is upside down. Government helps the weak people get strong and makes the strong people weak by taking their money away through taxes. Of course, helping weak people get strong increases their value, but never mind that, because it decreases your value, I see. All right. He said that his mindset was typical of instant billionaires in finance who have no stake in society, unlike the industrialists of the past who built real things. Another former high-level Renaissance employee said, Bob thinks the less government, the better. He's happy if people don't trust the government, and if the president's a bozo, he's fine with that. He wants it all to fall down. The 2016 presidential election posed a challenge for someone with Mercer's ideology. Multiple sources described him as animated mainly by hatred of Hillary Clinton. But Mercer also distrusted the Republican leadership. After the candidate he initially supported, Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, dropped out of the race, Mercer sought a disruptive figure who could upend both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party. In other words, it seems to me the situation was, I hate Hillary Clinton. I hope the Republican Party can topple her. I'm going to back someone who I think is the best candidate to help the Republican Party topple Hillary Clinton, because we all know it's a two-party system here. Ted Cruz. Damn, I'm wrong. Well, now I want to destroy the Republican Party, too. I'm so angry. All right, fine. Donald Trump. I was always for Trump. Yes, we're very much alike. All right, whatever, dude. Anger issues, I think. And I mean me. He probably estimated the probability of Trump winning, and when it wasn't very high, he said to himself, okay, what has to happen in order for this 20% thing to occur? We were all wondering about that. It's like playing a card game when you haven't got a very good hand. Mercer, as it happens, is a superb poker player, and his political gamble appears to have paid off. Institutional Investor, I would like to know, Institutional Investor has called it Robert Mercer's trade of the century. We really need an interview with Institutionalized Investor, I think would fit us better. In the 2016 campaign, Mercer gave $22.5 million in disclosed donations to Republican candidates and to political action committees. Tony Fabrizio, a Republican pollster who worked for the Trump campaign, Is he the one that didn't get paid for the longest time? He said that Mercer had catapulted to the top of the heap of right-of-center power brokers. It's worth noting that several other wealthy financiers, including Democrats such as Thomas Steyer and Donald Sussman, gave even more money to campaigns. One of the top Democratic donors was James Simons, the retired founder of Renaissance Technologies. Nevertheless, Mercer's political efforts stand apart. Adopting the strategy of Charles and David Koch, who are back in the news these days, the billionaire libertarians, Mercer enlarged his impact exponentially by combining short-term campaign spending with long-term ideological investments. He poured millions of dollars into Breitbart News and, in what David Magerman has called an extreme example of modern entrepreneurial philanthropy, made donations to dozens of politically tinged organizations. Like many wealthy families, the Mercers have a private foundation. At first, the Mercer Family Foundation, which was established in 2004, had an endowment of only $500,000, but most of its grants went to medical research and conventional charities. But by 2008, under the supervision of Mercer's ardently conservative daughter Rebekah, the foundation began giving millions of dollars to interconnected nonprofit groups, several of which played crucial roles in propagating attacks on Hillary Clinton. By 2015, the most recent year for which federal tax records are available, the foundation had grown into a $24.5 million operation that gave large sums to ultra-conservative organizations. On top of this nonprofit spending, Mercer invested in private businesses. He put $10 million into Breitbart News, which was conceived as a conservative counterweight to the Huffington Post. The website freely mixes right-wing political commentary with juvenile rants and racist innuendo under Bannon's direction. The editors introduced a rubric called Black Crime. The site played a role in undermining Hillary Clinton. By tracking which negative stories about her got the most clicks and likes, the editors helped identify which storylines and phrases were the most potent weapons against her. Breitbart News has been a remarkable success, I guess if you discount the fact that they were just underwritten by one guy. According to ComScore, the company that measures online traffic, the site attracted 19.2 million unique visitors in October. Mercer also invested some $5 million in Cambridge Analytica, a firm that mines online data to reach and influence potential voters. The company has said that it uses secret psychological methods to pinpoint which messages are the most persuasive to individual online viewers. The firm, which is the American affiliate of Strategic Communication Laboratories in London, has worked for candidates whom Mercer has backed, including Trump. It also reportedly worked on the Brexit campaign in the United Kingdom. Alexander Nix, the CEO of the firm, says that it has created profiles consisting of several thousand data points for 220 million Americans. In promotional materials, SCL has claimed to know how to use such data to wage both psychological and political warfare. Persuading somebody to vote a certain way, Nix has said publicly, is really very similar to persuading 14 to 25-year-old boys in Indonesia not to join Al-Qaeda. They could be doing that, but they're not. Some critics suggest that at this point, Cambridge Analytica's self-promotion exceeds its effectiveness. But Jonathan Albright, an assistant professor of communications at Elon University in North Carolina, recently published a paper on Medium calling Cambridge Analytica a propaganda machine. As important as Mercer's business investments is his hiring of advisors. Years before he started supporting Trump, he began funding several conservative activists, including Steve Bannon, as far back as 2012. Bannon was the Mercer's de facto political advisor. How do you get to be a political advisor to families? I don't know. Some people who have observed, maybe by doing a radio show. He did do a radio show, right? Wasn't that Bannon's background that they identified with him with in the, what was it, Reclaim New York? I have a radio show. Somebody please, honestly, I could advise you for just some small number of millions of dollars a year. And, I don't know, you could buy a president. Some people who have observed the Mercer's political evolution worry that Bannon has become a Svengali to the whole family, exploiting its political inexperience and tapping its fortune to further his own ambitions. I will just tap your fortune for the pure joy of having the fortune. I'll go on vacation a lot. I don't want to work in the White House. I just want to be like independently. I'll just keep doing the show from exotic locations. I could go visit Judy Vincent in Hawaii and maybe even buy an island. It was Bannon who urged the Mercers to invest in data analytics in the first place. He also encouraged the investment in Breitbart News, gee whiz, which was made through Gravitas Maximus LLC, a front group that had once had the same Long Island address as Renaissance Technologies. How weird. In an interview, Bannon praised the Mercers' strategic approach. The Mercers laid the groundwork for the Trump revolution. Irrefutably, when you look at donors during the past 4 years, they have had the single biggest impact of anybody, including the Kochs. So that's the secret. He's running Breitbart News, and he encouraged investment in Breitbart News. I can't even look people in the eye and say, it really would be nice if you enjoy the program, if you maybe helped out with $5, $10 a month of recurring donations. We'd be able to buy some new microphones, buy a new computer to back things up, and I'd be able to, make a living out of doing this. And there's no shame in that, except, I don't know, I feel that there is, and I'm unable to do it. This guy is like, just give me a couple $1 million, $100,000 here, $100,000 there, $200,000 there. I'll set up a bunch of companies. If you feel guilty about just giving me, $4 million, we'll split it up among 4 companies, $1 million each, and then I'll just keep all of that, and then it's all good. That worked for him. And he's a creep and looks like he's dying of skin cancer and fills hot tubs full of acid and has 3 ex-wives. I can't do this. I can't figure out a way to do this. I'm working on it. Okay. Last summer, Bannon and some other activists whom the Mercers have supported, including David Bossie, who initiated the Citizens United lawsuit, came together to rescue Trump's wobbly campaign. Why? Sam Nunberg, an early Trump advisor who watched Mercer's group take over, said Mercer was smart. He invested in the right people. I'd love to live in that alternate universe where Trump just flounders about with a vanity candidacy and then drops out eventually, never having cracked 20%. We were that close. Bannon and Rebekah Mercer have become particularly close political partners. Last month, when Bannon denounced the corporatist globalist media at the Conservative Political Action Conference in his first public appearance since entering the White House, Rebekah Mercer was part of his entourage. Bannon supports some initiatives, such as a major infrastructure program, that are anathema to libertarians such as Robert Mercer, but the Wall Street Journal has described Bannon joking and swearing on the deck of the Mercers' yacht, the Sea Owl, that if he were a member of the family, as if he were a member of the family. Okay, whatever. Okay, so that means that they get along despite a couple of political differences. Bannon assured me that the Mercers, despite all their luxuries, are the most middle-class people you will ever meet. Minus the Sea Owl, I suppose, and the mansion they live in on Long Island, and all that other stuff, like everything. Robert and Diana Mercer brought up their 3 daughters in a modest home near IBM's Thomas J. Watson Research Center in Westchester County, a small pocket of Appalachian poverty, Westchester County. The girls attended public schools. Oh my gosh, you're giving me the vapors here. And Robert and Diana worried about paying 3 college tuitions. According to Donna D'Andrea, I guess? It's really D'Andrea, Andraia. That's a weird spelling of it, but I think it's D'Andrea. Donna D'Andrea, a family friend. Diana, Mrs. Mercer, I guess here, was a PTA member and a tiger mom. Remember when that was acceptable thing to call somebody? Who made sure that the girls did all the right things. They were in the honor society and stayed out of trouble. D'Andrea recalled Diana saying that Robert was brilliant, but D'Andrea found it hard to tell because he was very quiet. He didn't talk to anybody. All right. The eldest Mercer daughter, Jennifer, or Genji, attended Stanford. Rebecca, the middle daughter, enrolled at Cornell and then transferred to Stanford. Majoring in biology and math, she graduated in 1996. A few years later, she got an MA in operations research. The youngest daughter, Heather Sue, quote, was the Spitfire, DeAndrea recalled. When Heather Sue was a junior in high school, she tried out to be a place kicker on the football team. She made it, good for you, and after enrolling at Duke University, she joined its varsity squad. When the Duke coach refused to treat her as the equal of her male teammates, she sued the school for gender discrimination and won $2 million in damages, which no doubt is anathema now to the Mercer family, but okay. Ron Santavica, Heather Sue's high school coach, described the Mercers, who still invite him to their Christmas parties, as the salt of the earth, plus $1 billion. He added, the whole family is very determined. When they have a mission, they go after it. That really is pretty amazing. By the way, I would venture to guess that the Duke coach refuses to treat his male place kickers as the equal of the rest of his football team. But I don't know. Duke's nothing to brag about in football anyway. In 1993, when Nick Patterson, mailed Robert Mercer a job offer from Renaissance. And that's another one of those things. I'd love to know how that comes together. He's an IBM computer scientist. And in 1993, a hedge fund guy says, you know what we need? We need a middle class computer scientist who's admittedly brilliant at computer science, but who doesn't talk to anybody, to come here and teach us how to invest. What? So, in 1993, when Nick Patterson mails Robert Mercer a job offer from Renaissance, Mercer threw it in the trash. He'd never heard of the hedge fund. How did you get the job offer? In 1993, I'm sitting around waiting for hedge funds to just out of the blue email me or mail me. Send me a letter. I'll give you a job. You'll become a billionaire. You want it? And I couldn't. We were temping in the early 90s. This guy, I don't know. Okay. How? Let's see if we can find out. Maybe, I hope that it's discussed in here. At the time, Mercer was part of a team pioneering the use of computers to translate languages. All right, maybe they're interested in that as an investment. IBM considered the project a bit of a luxury and didn't see its potential. Again, what? Though the work laid the foundation for Google Translate and Apple's Siri. Can't see the. So that's where IBM is now. But Mercer and his main partner, Peter Brown, found the project exciting and had the satisfaction of showing up experts in the field who had dismissed their statistical approach to translating languages as impractical. Instead of trying to teach a computer linguistic rules, Mercer and Brown downloaded enormous quantities of dual language documents, including Canadian parliamentary records, and created code that analyzed the data and detected patterns, enabling predictions of probable translations. That's smart. That's good. Investments? I don't know. According to a former IBM colleague, Mercer was obsessive and at one point took 6 months off to type into a computer every entry in a Spanish-English dictionary. I might do something like that, but I'd be fired. Sebastian Mallaby, in his 2010 book on the hedge fund industry, More Money Than God, reports that Mercer's boss at IBM once jokingly called him an automaton. Now, I have to tell you, I'm thinking, I just the other day watched on Netflix, which I actually subscribed to and forgot about. I guess I could trim that fat from my budget. Although it was a holiday gift from my wife. I really wanted it to, and I meant to watch lots of movies. Instead, I watched one, The Big Short, and wasn't like the main hedge fund guy in that also like, he was a doctor who was just a wacko recluse who wouldn't talk to anybody and was a total weirdo. How did this stuff happen? I missed the wave where they would pick up introverts out of the blue and make them billionaires. Where was I? I do not know. I was working on Capitol Hill. I could have been scooped up in a minute from that. It was like a $24,000 a year job. That sucked. In 2014, Mercer accepted a Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association for Computational Linguistics. In a speech at the ceremony, Mercer, who grew up in New Mexico, said that he had a jaundiced view of government, putting it mildly. While in college, he had worked on a military base in Albuquerque, and he had showed his superiors how to run certain computer programs 100 times faster. Instead of saving time and money, the bureaucrats ran 100 times more equations. He concluded that the goal of government officials was not so much to get answers as to consume the computer budget. and he might not be wrong about that. Mercer's colleagues say that he views the government as arrogant and inefficient and believes that individuals need to be self-sufficient and should not receive aid from the state, unless they want to type in a Spanish-English dictionary on someone else's dime, but okay. Yet when IBM failed to offer adequate support for Mercer and Brown's translation project, they secured additional funding from DARPA. Oh boy, that must be it. The secretive Pentagon program. Despite Mercer's disdain for big government, this funding was essential to his early success. But F the rest of you. Meanwhile, Patterson kept asking Mercer and Brown to join Renaissance. He thought that their technique of extracting patterns from huge amounts of data could be applied to the pile of numbers generated daily by the global trade in stocks, bonds, commodities, and currencies. The patterns could generate predictive financial models that would give traders a decisive edge. In the spring of 1993, Mercer experienced 2 devastating losses. His mother was killed in a car crash, and his father, a biologist, died 6 weeks later. With life's precariousness made painfully clear, and with tuition bills mounting, he decided to leave IBM for a higher-paying job at Renaissance. Brown made the leap, too. Renaissance was founded by James Simons, 1M, S-I-M-O-N-S, a legendary mathematician, in 1982. Mathematician, okay. That makes some sense. Simmons, perhaps, had run the math department at Stony Brook University on Long Island, and the hedge fund took a uniquely academic approach to high finance. Andrew Lo, a finance professor at MIT's Sloan School of Management, has described it as, quote, the commercial version of the Manhattan Project, unquote. Intensely secretive and filled with people with PhDs, it has been sensationally profitable. Its medallion fund, which is open only to the firm's 300 or so employees, has averaged returns of almost 80% a year before fees. Bloomberg News has called the Medallion Fund perhaps the world's greatest money-making machine. In More Money Than God, Malaby, who interviewed Mercer, describes his temperament as that of an icy-cold poker player. Mercer told him that he could not recall ever having had a nightmare, but Mercer warms up when talking about computers. In a 2014 speech, he recalled the first time he used one at a science camp and likened the experience to falling in love. He also spoke of the government lab in New Mexico. I love the solitude of the computer lab late at night, he said. I loved the air-conditioned smell of the place. I loved the sound of the disks whirring and the printers clacking. The speech lasted 40 minutes, more than I typically talk in a month, he noted. Patterson told me that when Mercer arrived at Renaissance, the firm's equities division was lagging behind other areas, such as futures trading. Mercer and Brown applied their algorithms to equities trading. It took several years, Patterson recalled, but the equities group eventually accounted for the largest share of the Medallion Fund's profits. Mercer and Brown's code took into account nearly every conceivable predictor of market swings. Their secret formula became so valuable that when a pair of Russian mathematicians at the firm tried to take the recipe elsewhere, the company initiated legal action against them. Stop those Russians from stealing our secrets, I guess, this time. Renaissance's profits were further enhanced by a controversial tax maneuver which became the subject of a 2014 Senate inquiry. According to Senate investigators, Renaissance had presented countless short-term trades as long-term ones, improperly avoiding some $6.8 billion in taxes. The Senate didn't allege criminality, but it concluded that Renaissance had committed, quote, abuses. The IRS demanded payment. Renaissance defended its practices, and the matter remains contested, leaving a very sensitive material issue pending before the Trump administration, by the way. Very interesting. These short-term trades, they're actually long-term trades, and we should get a big tax break on them. Oh, really? Based on what? Based on you probably can't sue me fast enough. The Medallion Fund made Renaissance employees among the wealthiest people in the country. Forbes estimated that Simons, who has the biggest share, is worth $18 billion. In 2009, Simons stepped aside to focus on philanthropy and named Mercer and Brown co-CEOs. Institutional investors Alpha estimates that in 2015, Mercer earned $135 million at Renaissance. Mercer's fortune has allowed him and his family to indulge their wildest material fantasies. He and Diana moved into a waterfront estate in Head of the Harbor, a seaside community on Long Island, and called the property Owl's Nest. Mercer, a gun enthusiast, built a private pistol range there. Maybe his guns need cleaning. He is also part owner of Center Firearms, a company that claims to have the country's largest private cache of machine guns, as well as a weapon that Arnold Schwarzenegger wielded in The Terminator. Hooray. At Owl's Nest, Mercer has installed a $2.7 million model train set in his basement, just like Arthur. Trains chug through a miniature landscape half the size of a basketball court. The toy train attracted unwanted tabloid headlines, such as "Boo-hoo over $2 million choo-choo," after Mercer sued the manufacturer for overcharging him. The case was settled. Mercer, why would he care about being overcharged? Mercer retains a domestic staff that includes a butler, of course, and a physician, so he'll never die. Both accompany him wherever he travels. But this, too, has sparked bad publicity. In 2013, 3 members of the household staff sued to recover back wages, claiming that Mercer had failed to pay overtime as promised, and that he had deducted pay as punishment for poor work. One infraction that Mercer cited was a demerit was a failure to replace shampoo bottles that were 2/3 empty. This suit, too, was settled. You didn't replace my tissue boxes for my feet fast enough. Mercer has bought several spectacular yachts, salt of the earth, including the Sea Owl, which is 203 feet long because he's so middle class. A 2013 photo shows the gates of the Tower Bridge in London raised high to allow it to proceed up the Thames. The Sea Owl has a crew of 18, features a hand-carved tree that twists through 4 levels of decks. Designed in part as a place where the extended Mercer family can get together, and also Steve Bannon, the yacht has many fanciful and didactic touches for the Mercer grandchildren, such as frescoes that allude to the discoveries of Darwin and Newton. There's a self-playing Steinway, a spa pool, and an elevator. Mercer has given major credit to his family for the yacht's special details, telling Boat International that they are, quote, endowed with both exceptionally good taste and exceptionally strong opinions, unquote. The Mercer daughters are indeed forceful. When a Manhattan bakery that the sisters loved, Ruby et Violette, threatened to close, depriving the Mercers of their favorite cookies, they bought it. I was so impressed, I bought the company. In a Fox News interview, Heather Sue recalled telling the others, "We are going to buy a bakery." The Mercers still own the business, although it's now online only. They don't want to see people. They just want to get money for cookies. After graduating from Duke, Heather Sue began competing in high-stakes poker tournaments. She is admired on the circuit for her cool manner. It doesn't matter if you lose a whole lot of money at poker because your dad's a billionaire. So I guess that would help contribute to a cool manner. Plus she could kick, so that's good. When Mercer insisted that Heather Sue take a security guard with her, Santavica said they became friends, then they became whatever, and now they're married with 2 beautiful daughters. That's another good job. Genji has a law degree from Georgetown, but she has pursued an interest in horses instead, because who cares? In 2008, the Mercers bought a horse farm in Wellington, Florida for $5.9 million. Then they sued the seller for overcharging them, probably at some point. It's not in here. But Genji and Diana regularly attend the Winter Equestrian Festival in Palm Beach. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. They are investors in an equestrian center in North Carolina and have announced plans to open one in Colorado. Super important. Diana is also listed as the owner of Equanimity, a horse stable in Florida. According to the stable's website, it specializes in equine facilitated learning, a system that teaches nonverbal leadership and interpersonal communication skills through non-predatory horse-inspired wisdom. Salt of the earth. I hate coastal elites and their stupid stupid hipster crap. Except this. Rebekah worked for a few years at Renaissance after graduating from Stanford. Good job. A former colleague recalls her as smart but haughty. In 2003, she married a Frenchman. Oh no. Sylvain, this is a French name? Not originally, I guess. Mirochnikov. Sylvain Mirochnikov, who is a managing director of Morgan Stanley. They had 4 children and bought a $28 million property. 6 apartments joined together at Trump Place on the Upper West Side. Now 43, she's divorcing Mirochnikov. She homeschools the children, but in recent years, she has become consumed by politics. She is the first lady of the alt-right, Christopher Ruddy, the owner of the conservative outlet Newsmax Media, said. She's respected in conservative circles because she's got money and she'll give it to them. And clearly Trump has embraced her in a big way. Amity Shlaes, remember her? She's in this thing. The conservative writer and chair of the Calvin Coolidge Presidential Foundation, where Rebekah Mercer is a trustee, told me, in the dull crowds of policy, the Mercers are enchanting firecrackers. They just give me so much money. They're so enchanting, I guess. Amity, you'll remember, is the one who said that Roosevelt made the Great Depression worse. Anyway, she likened the Mercer sisters to the Schuyler's, the high-spirited, witty sisters made famous by the musical Hamilton. Shlaes went on, the Mercers have strong values, they're kind of funny, and they're really bright, and they give me money. Their brains are almost too strong, and they give me money. Rebekah, she noted, supports several think tanks by giving them money, but grows tired of talk. She is into action. Woo! After the Citizens United decision in 2010, the Mercers were among the first people to take advantage of the opportunity to spend more money on politics. In Oregon, they quietly gave money to a super PAC, an independent campaign-related group that could now take unlimited donations. In New York, reporters discovered that Robert Mercer was the sole donor behind $1 million advertising campaign attacking what it described as a plan to build a ground zero mosque in Manhattan. Remember that one? Gee whiz, how did they prevail in that stupidity? Well, here's $1 million. The proposed building was neither a mosque nor at ground zero. The ads, which were meant to boost a conservative party candidate for governor, were condemned as Islamophobic. In Oregon, the Mercers gave $640,000 to a group that attacked Representative Peter DeFazio, a Democrat, with a barrage of negative ads during the final weeks of his 2010 re-election campaign. This effort also failed. It didn't help when DeFazio announced that a New York hedge fund manager and his daughter were meddling in Oregon politics. Press accounts speculated that Robert Mercer may have targeted DeFazio because DeFazio had proposed a tax on a type of high-volume stock trade that Renaissance frequently made. I'll get you for that. I only will have several $1 billion instead of all of the billions of dollars. But several associates of Mercer's say that the truth is stranger. DeFazio's Republican opponent was Arthur Robinson, the biochemist, sheep rancher, and climate change denialist. The Mercers became his devoted supporters after reading Access to Energy, an offbeat scientific newsletter that he writes. The family has given at least $1.6 million in donations to Robinson's Oregon Institute of Science and Medicine. Some of the money was used to buy freezers in which Robinson is storing some 14,000 samples of human urine. Robinson has said that by studying the urine, he will find new ways of extending the human lifespan. Or at least making it feel like the human lifespan is that much longer. Wow. There's a lot of urine around the Trump situation, I find. Robinson holds a degree in chemistry from Caltech, but his work is not respected in most scientific circles. The Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley, a Democrat, has called Robinson an extremist kook. Robinson appears to be the source of Robert Mercer's sanguine view of nuclear radiation. In 1986, Robinson co-authored a book suggesting that the vast majority of Americans would survive an all-out atomic attack on the United States. Robinson's institute dismisses climate change as a false religion. I hope he's not advising Trump. So what? We have a nuclear war. Most people would survive and they'd be healthier anyway. Oh, okay. Robinson's institute dismisses climate change as a false religion. A petition that he organized in 1998 to oppose the Kyoto Protocol, claiming to represent 30,000 scientists skeptical of global warming, has been criticized as deceptive, you think? The National Academy of Sciences has warned that the petition never appeared in a peer-reviewed journal, though it is printed in a format that is nearly identical to that of scientific articles. We've heard that before in this piece, haven't we? The petition, however, still circulates online. In the past year, it was the most shared item about climate change on Facebook. Thank you, Cambridge Analytica. Robinson, who calls himself a Jesus plus nothing else Christian, has become a hero to the religious right for homeschooling his 6 children. Robert and Rebekah Mercer have praised a curriculum that Robinson sells. An advertisement for it casts doubt on evolution. No demonstration has ever been made of the process of spontaneous origin of life. Robinson has said that the socialist agenda of public schools is evil and represents a form of child abuse. Even though 2010 was a successful election year for Republicans, the candidates that the Mercers had supported in Oregon and New York both lost decisively. Their investments had achieved nothing. Wealthy political donors sometimes make easy marks for campaign operatives. Patrick Cadell, the former pollster, told me, "These people who get so rich by running businesses get so taken in when it comes to politics. They're just sheep." Get it? Sheep. The consultants suck it out of them. I'm a consultant, but I don't. A lot of them are surrounded by palace guards, but that's not true of the Mercers. By 2011, he became a good friend of the Mercers. No, it says by 2011, the Mercers had joined forces with Charles and David Koch, who own Koch Industries and who have run a powerful political machine for decades. The Mercers attended the Koch's semi-annual seminars, which provide a structure for right-wing millionaires looking for effective ways to channel their cash. The Mercers admired the savviness of the Koch's plan, which called for attendees to pool their contributions, like insurance, in a fund run by Koch operatives. The fund would strategically deploy the money in races across the country, although at the time the Koch's chief aim was to defeat Barack Obama in 2012. It just struck me as how odd is it that hedge fund operators hate the concept of health insurance and and risk pooling. Hedge fund operators, I tell you. The Kochs will not reveal the identities of their donors or the size of the contributions, but the Mercers reportedly began giving at least $1 million a year to the Kochs fund. Eventually, they contributed more than $25 million. The Mercers also joined the Council for National Policy, which the Times has described as a little-known club of a few hundred of the most powerful conservatives in the country. The Mercers have contributed hundreds of thousands of dollars. The group swears participants to secrecy, but a leaked 2014 roster revealed that it included many people who promoted anti-Clinton conspiracy stories, including Joseph Farah, noted gun failure and editor of WorldNet Daily. The group also brought the Mercers into the orbit of 2 people who have become key figures in the Trump White House, Kellyanne Conway, who herself is a tenant of a Trump building, well, not a tenant, but an owner in a Trump building, who was on the group's executive committee, and Steve Bannon. In 2011, the Mercers met Andrew Breitbart, the founder of the fiery news outlet that bears his name, at a conference organized by the Club for Growth, which isn't supposed to be a part of this sector, a conservative group. They were so impressed by him, why, I don't know, that they became interested in investing in his operation. Breitbart, a gleefully offensive provocateur, was the temperamental opposite of Robert Mercer. In 2010, Breitbart told this magazine, "I like to call someone a raving C-word every now and then when it's appropriate for effect." So what? Nevertheless, the Mercers were attracted to Breitbart's vision of, quote, taking back the culture. by building a media enterprise that could wage information warfare against the mainstream press, empowering what Breitbart called the silenced majority. Breitbart soon introduced the Mercers to Steve Bannon. For a while, Breitbart News operated out of office space that Bannon owned in Santa Monica. A Harvard Business School graduate, Bannon had worked at Goldman Sachs, but he eventually left the world of finance and began making political films. His ambition, apparently, was to become the Michael Moore of the right, another one of these of the rights. In the aughts, he directed polemical documentaries, among them Fire from the Heartland and District of Corruption. A former associate of Bannon's in California recalls him as a strategic thinker who was adept at manipulating the media. A voracious reader, he was quick and charming, but, according to the former associate, he had a chip on his shoulder about class. He often spoke of having grown up in a blue-collar Irish Catholic family in Richmond, Virginia, and of having served as a naval officer when he was young. Bannon seemed to feel excluded from the social world of Wall Street peers who had attended prep schools. He had left Goldman Sachs in 1990 without making partner, and though he was well off, he had missed out on the gigantic profits that partners had made when the company went public in 1999. Well, he left 9 years earlier. Whose fault is that? In 2011, Bannon drafted a business plan for the Mercers that called for them to invest $10 million in Breitbart News in exchange for a large stake. At the time, the Breitbart site was little more than a collection of blogs. The Mercers signed the deal that June, and one of its provisions placed Bannon on the company's board. 9 months later, Andrew Breitbart died mysteriously, weird, at 43 of a heart attack. Now launching the new conspiracy theory that Steve Bannon murdered Andrew Breitbart. Hello, how you doing? I'm probably not even the first one to come up with that. And Bannon, mysteriously, wackily, crazily enough, became the site's executive chairman, overseeing its content. The Mercers, meanwhile, became Bannon's principal patrons. Everywhere, not just at Breitbart. The Washington Post recently published a house rental lease that Bannon signed in 2013, on which he said that his salary at Breitbart News was $750,000. Again, it would be nice to clear $1,000 a month for the radio show. Would be terrific. But $750,000 would be nice too. If any of you are billionaires, please let me know. Under Bannon's leadership, the website expanded dramatically, adding a fleet of full-time writers. It became a new force on the right, boosting extreme insurgents against the GOP establishment, such as David Bratt, who in 2014 took the seat of Eric Cantor, the Virginia congressman. But it also provided a public forum for previously shunned, with good reason, white nationalist, sexist, and racist voices. One pundit hired by Bannon was Milo Yiannopoulos, who specialized in puerile insults. I specialize in those too. No one will hire me for them. He recently resigned from the site after a video of him lewdly defending pederasty went viral. Yes, and I have an article in pocket somewhere about the Mercers' direct investment in him as well. What do you know? Such a surprise. In 2014, Bannon began hosting a radio show that often featured Patrick Cadell, who effectively had been banished by the Democratic Party leaders after years of tempestuous campaigns and fallings out. On the air, Cadell floated dark theories about Hillary Clinton and often sounded a lot like Bannon, describing economic nationalism as the driving force in American politics. Isn't that what everybody imagined Jimmy Carter to have been about? Under Barack Obama, he said America had turned into a banana republic. By 2016, Breitbart News claims it had the most shared political content on Facebook, giving the Mercers a platform that no other conservative donors could match. Rebekah Mercer is highly engaged with Breitbart's content. An insider there said she reads every story and calls when there are grammatical errors or typos. Thanks, Mom. Though she doesn't dictate a political line to the editor, she often points out areas of coverage that she thinks require more attention. Her views about the Washington establishment, including the Republican leadership, are scathing. She was at the avant-garde of shuttering both political parties. the insider at Breitbart said. She went a long way toward the redefinition of American politics. Meh. The Mercers' investment in Breitbart enabled Bannon to promote anti-establishment politicians whom the mainstream media dismissed, including Trump. In 2011, David Bossie, the head of the conservative group Citizens United, introduced Trump to Bannon. At the time, Trump was thinking about running against Obama. Bannon and Trump met at Trump Tower and discussed a possible campaign. Trump decided against the idea, but the two kept in touch, and Bannon gave Trump admiring coverage. Bannon noticed that when Trump spoke to crowds, people were electrified. Bannon began to think that Trump might be the one who could shake up American politics. Breitbart gave Trump a big role. Sam Nunberg, the aide who worked on the early stages of Trump's campaign, has said, "They gave us an outlet. No one else would. It allowed us to define our narrative and communicate our message. It really started with the birther thing. Trump's false claim that Obama was not born an American citizen, and then immigration and Iran. Trump was developing his message. By 2013, Nunberg said Trump, like others on Breitbart, was hitting the establishment by slamming the Republican leadership in Congress, including Paul Ryan. Nunberg added, it wasn't like Charlie Rose was asking us on." The Mercer Family Foundation kept expanding its political investments. Between 2011 and 2014, it gave nearly $11 million to the Media Research Center, an advocacy group whose sole mission, according to its website, is to expose and neutralize the propaganda arm of the left, whichever that might be, the national news media. Oh, I see. Expose and neutralize them. The group's founder, L. Brent Bozell III, outsider supreme, I'm sure, is best known for his successful campaign to get CBS sanctioned for showing Janet Jackson's bared breast during the 2004 Super Bowl broadcast. God damn it. The Mercers have been among the MRC's biggest donors, and their money has allowed the group to revamp its news site and now claims to reach more than 200 million Americans a week. In 2012, the Mercer Family Foundation donated $2 million to Citizens United, which had trafficked in Clinton hatred for years. During the Clinton administration, David Bossie, the group's leader, was a Republican congressional aide, and he was forced to resign after releasing misleading material about a Clinton associate. In 2008, Citizens United released a vitriolic film, Hillary the Movie. 2 years ago, after the group received an additional $550,000 from the Mercers Foundation, it filed a Freedom of Information Act request demanding access to Hillary Clinton's State Department emails. When the emails were released, her presidential campaign became mired in negative news stories. Bannon has often collaborated with Bossie, producing half a dozen films with him. In 2012, Bossie suggested a new joint project, a movie that urged Democrats and independents to abandon Obama in the presidential election. The film's approach was influenced by polling work that Patrick Cadell had shared with Bannon. The data suggested that attacking Obama was counterproductive. It was more effective to express disappointment in him by contrasting him with earlier presidents. Cadell and Bannon made an unholy alliance, but they had things in common. Both men were Irish Catholic sons of the South, scourges to their respective parties, and prone to apocalyptic pronouncements. "We hit it off right away," Cadell told me. "We're both revolutionaries." Bannon was excited by Cadell's polling research and persuaded Citizens United to hire Cadell to convene focus groups of disillusioned Obama supporters. Many of these voters became the central figures of The Hope and the Change, an anti-Obama film that Bannon and Citizens United released during the 2012 Democratic National Convention. After Cadell saw the film, he pointed out to Bannon that its opening imitated that of Triumph of the Will, the 1935 Ode to Hitler, made by the Nazi filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl. Bannon laughed and said, "You're the only one that caught it." In both films, a plane flies over a blighted land as ominous music swells. Then clouds in the sky part, auguring a new era. "The disappointed voters in the film seared into me," Bannon said, "the fact that middle-class Americans badly wanted change and could be lured away from the Democratic Party if they felt they had been conned." Well, I guess you have your own worries. to think about now. In 2012, Citizens United's foundation paid Bannon's strategic advisors, a consultancy group founded by Bannon, $300,000 for what it described to the IRS as fundraising services. Remember that description from the graphic we were reading from the Center for Public Integrity? Bossy told me that the tax filing must have been made in error. The payment was actually for Bannon's film development work. Charitable groups are barred from spending tax-deductible contributions on partisan politics, yet, as Breitbart News noted at the time, The Hope and the Change was a partisan film targeting Democrats during an election year. Even so, the Mercers took a hefty tax deduction for their $2 million donation to Citizens United. Bossy told me that the Mercers are very interested in films. Indeed, Rebekah Mercer is on the board of the Moving Pictures Institute, a conservative group devoted to countering Hollywood liberalism with original online entertainment. Among its recent projects was a cartoon, Everyone Coughs. Oh, we'll be glad to hear about that one, won't we, Greg? I'm about to do that myself. Which spread the rumor that Hillary Clinton was mortally ill. The film ended by depicting an animated Clinton literally coughing herself to death. What a creative ending. On election night in 2012, the Mercers and other top conservative donors settled into the VIP section of a Republican Party victory celebration, having been assured that their investment would pay off. Obama's defeat of Mitt Romney particularly infuriated Rebekah Mercer, who concluded that the pollsters, the data crunchers, and the spin doctors were all frauds. Soon afterward, Republican Party officials invited big donors to the University Club in New York for a post-mortem on the election. I knew they did do one. The public one was a lot better sounding, anyway. Attendees were stunned when Rebekah Mercer ripped the S out of them, a friend of hers told me, adding it was really her coming out. As the Financial Times has reported, from that point on, Mercer wanted to know exactly how her donations were being spent and wanted to invest only in what another friend described as, quote, things that she thinks put lead on the target. That year, Rebekah Mercer joined the board of the Government Accountability Institute, a non-profit group based in Tallahassee, which Bannon had recently founded. In 2013, the Mercer Family Foundation contributed $1 million to the institute, and in 2014 it contributed another $1 million. And in 2015 it donated $1.7 million, which exceeded the group's entire budget the previous year. The GAI, meanwhile, paid Bannon $376,000 during its first 4 years. It told the IRS that Bannon was working for it 30 hours a week, ostensibly on top of his full-time job running Breitbart News. Sounds like a part-time job, $376,000. The GAI billed itself as a nonpartisan research institute, but in 2015, Bannon told Bloomberg Businessweek that its mission was to dig up dirt on politicians and feed it to the mainstream media. A GAI staffer called this weaponizing information. The group reportedly hired an expert to comb the deep web, sites that don't show up in standard searches, for incriminating information about its targets. The plan was to exploit the mainstream media's growing inability to finance investigative reporting by doing it for them. That's a good/terrible idea. Basically, the video news release reworked, though. The strategy paid off spectacularly in April 2015 when the Times ran a front-page article based on the book Clinton Cash, a compendium of corruption allegations against the Clintons, which was written by the GAI's president, the conservative writer Peter Schweitzer. The GAI had given the paper an advance copy. The book triggered one story after another about Hillary Clinton's supposed criminality and became a bestseller. In 2016, a film version, co-produced by Bannon and Rebekah Mercer, debuted at the Cannes Film Festival as the Mercers' yacht bobbed offshore. And do I have that pronunciation right? I never have gotten that one. It's very famous, but as people, I hear Americans saying Cannes. Is that it? Is Cannes or Cannes or what? S? No S? Probably no, right? That's French. The GAI also undermined Jeb Bush, the candidate favored by the Republican establishment, with another Schweitzer book, Bush Bucks, As Bannon put it in a 2015 interview, it depicted Bush as a figure of grimy, low-energy crony capitalism. Meanwhile, who's a bigger crony capitalist than this guy? All right, whatever. During this period, the Mercers continued giving money to election campaigns. In 2014, Robert Mercer made a $2.5 million contribution to the Koch's Freedom Partners Action Fund. This exceeded the $2 million contributions of Charles and David Koch themselves, prompting a memorable headline about Mercer from Bloomberg News, "The Man Who Out-Koch'd the Kochs." Rebekah Mercer, meanwhile, was growing impatient with the Kochs. She felt that they needed to investigate why their network had failed to defeat Obama in 2012. Instead, the Kochs gathered donors and presented them with more empty rhetoric. Mercer demanded an accounting of what had gone wrong, and when they ignored her, she decided to start her own operation. In a further blow, Mercer soured several other top donors on the Kochs. In 2012, one area in which the Republicans had lagged badly behind the Democrats was in the use of digital analytics. The Mercers decided to finance their own big data project. In 2014, Michael Kosinski, a researcher in the psychology department of the University of Cambridge, was working in the emerging field of psychometrics, the quantitative study of human characteristics. He learned from a colleague that a British company, Strategic Communications Laboratories, wanted to hire academics to pursue similar research for commercial purposes. Kosinski had circulated personality tests on Facebook and in the process obtained huge amounts of information about users. From this data, algorithms could be fashioned that would predict people's behavior and anticipate their reactions to other online prompts. Those who took the Facebook quizzes, however, had been promised that the information would be used strictly for academic purposes. Kosinski felt that repurposing it for commercial use was unethical and possibly illegal. His concerns deepened when he researched SCL. He was disturbed to learn that the company specialized in psychological warfare and in influencing elections. He spurned the chance to work with SCL, although his colleagues signed a contract with the company. Kosinski was further disconcerted when he learned that the new American affiliate of SCL, Cambridge Analytica, owned principally by an American hedge fund tycoon named Robert Mercer, was attempting to influence elections in the U.S. Kosinski, who is now an assistant professor of organizational behavior at Stanford's Business School, supports the idea of using psychometric data to nudge people toward socially positive behavior, such as voting, but he told me there's a thin line between convincing people and manipulating them. It is unclear if the Mercers have pushed Cambridge Analytica to cross that line. A company spokesman declined to comment for this story. What is clear is that Mercer, having revolutionized the use of data on Wall Street, was eager to accomplish the same feat in the political realm. He screened many data mining companies before investing, and he chose Cambridge Analytica in part because its high concentration of accomplished scientists reminded him of Renaissance technologies. Rebekah Mercer, too, had been deeply involved in the venture. Cambridge Analytica shares a corporate address in Manhattan with a group she chairs, Reclaim New York, which opposes government spending somehow. Bannon has reportedly served as a corporate officer for both Reclaim and Cambridge Analytica. Political scientists and consultants continue to debate Cambridge Analytica's record in the 2016 campaign. David Karpf, an assistant professor at George Washington University who studies the political use of data, calls the firm's claim to have special psychometric powers a marketing pitch. It's untrue. Karpf worries, though, that the company could take a very dark turn. He explained what they could do is set up a move-on style operation with a Tea Party-ish list that they could whip up. Typically, lists like that are used to pressure elected officials, but the dangerous thing would be if it was used instead to pressure fellow citizens. It could encourage vigilantism. Karpf said of Cambridge Analytica, there is a maximalist scenario in which we should be terrified to have a tool like that in private hands. Cambridge Analytica is not the only data-driven political project that the Mercers have backed. In 2013, at a conservative conference in Palm Beach, an oil tycoon named William Lee Hanley, who had commissioned some polls from Patrick Cadell, asked him to show the data to Mercer and Bannon, who were at the event. The data showed mounting anger toward wealthy elites who paid for this polling, of course, and who were at this Palm Beach gathering, but who many Americans believed had corrupted the government so that it served only their interests. There was a hunger for populist presidential candidates, or a presidential candidate anyway, who would run against the major political parties and the ruling class. The data showed that someone could just walk into this election and sweep it, Cadell told me. When Mercer saw the numbers, he asked for the polling to be repeated. Cadell got the same results, amazingly. It was stunning, he said. The country was on the verge of an uprising against its leaders. I just fell over. Until Election Day in 2016, Mercer and Hanley, two of the richest men in America, paid Cadell to keep collecting polling data that enabled them to exploit the public's resentment of elites such as themselves. Cadell's original goal was to persuade his sponsors to back an independent candidate, but they never did. In 2014, Cadell and his two partners went public with what they called the Candidate Smith Project, which promoted data suggesting that the public wanted a Mr. Smith Goes to Washington figure, an outsider as president. During the next year or so, Cadell's poll numbers tilted more and more away from the establishment. Cadell's partner, Bob Perkins, an advertising executive and a former finance director for the Republican Party, told me, by then it was clear there wouldn't be a third-party candidate, but we thought that a Republican who harnessed the angst had a real chance. At one point, Cadell tested all the declared presidential candidates, including Trump, as a possible Mr. Smith. People didn't think Trump had the temperament to be president, Cadell said. He clearly wasn't the best Smith, but he was the only Smith. He was the only one with the resources and the name recognition. As Bernie Sanders' campaign showed, the populist rebellion wasn't partisan. Cadell worried, though, that there were dark undertones in the numbers. Americans were increasingly yearning for a strong man to fix the country. Cadell circulated his research to anyone who would listen, and that included people inside the Trump campaign. Pat Cadell is like an Old Testament prophet, Bannon said. He's been talking about alienation of the voters for 25 years, and people didn't pay attention, but he's a brilliant guy and he nailed it. The political consultant and strategist Roger Stone, who is a longtime Trump confidant, was fascinated by the research, and he forwarded a memo about it to Trump. Cadell said that he spoke with Trump about some of the data, but noted, with Trump it's all instinct, and he's not exactly a deep dive thinker. Robert Mercer, too, was kept informed. Perkins said he just loves the numbers. Most people say, tell me what you think, don't show me the numbers. But he's like, give me the numbers. During the 2016 campaign, as the Mercers considered which presidential candidate to back, they rejected insiders such as Jeb Bush and Marco Rubio, who they believed couldn't win. They initially gravitated toward Ted Cruz, in part because he was an outsider in the Senate, loathed even by his Republican peers. During the primaries, the Mercers gave $11 million to a super PAC supporting Cruz, run by Kellyanne Conway. According to Politico, Rebekah Mercer soon wore out her welcome with the Cruz campaign by offering withering appraisals of his debate performances. She also insisted that the campaign hire Cambridge Analytica, even though Cruz campaign officials were skeptical of it. After Cruz dropped out, many Republicans, including Cruz himself, recoiled from Trump. The Mercers, however, joined the Trump camp and publicly rebuked Cruz, giving a statement to the Times. If Clinton won, the Mercers claimed she would repeal both the First and Second Amendments of the Bill of Rights. Given the stakes, they said, all hands were needed on deck in order to ensure a Trump victory. Cruz, they noted, had chosen to stay in his bunk below. The Mercers redirected their Cruz super PAC to support Trump and gave $2 million to it. According to one Trump advisor, there were strings attached to the donation. He says that 2 weeks before Cruz dropped out, Bannon urged the Trump campaign to talk to Alexander Nix, Cambridge Analytica's CEO, about hiring the company. The previous year, the Trump campaign had rebuffed a pitch from the firm. The advisor said that Nix followed up and offered cash inducements in the form of a finder's fee to a Trump operative. A Cambridge Analytica spokesman denied that this occurred. By the way, not mentioned here. This is interesting. I mean, read this again here. Bannon urged the Trump campaign to talk to Alexander Nix, Cambridge Analytica CEO, about hiring the company. The advisor said that Nix followed up and offered cash inducements in the form of a finder's fee to a Trump operative. But they can't, does this mean that they can't figure out who the Trump operative is? Is it Bannon? Because I know I've read in other interviews and stories and profiles about Bannon that when he talks about when he joined the campaign formally, and in stories we've read about Cambridge Analytica, the Bannon's story about joining the Trump campaign was, well, when I heard that he was going to work with Cambridge Analytica, that's when I decided to get in. That's when I decided I wanted to be a part of this campaign. That was the sole reason. Now, wouldn't that be interesting if, in fact, Cambridge Analytica was going to pay a cash finder's fee to Bannon, and Bannon says, you don't have to pay me, Mr. Trump. I'll work for free. But the only reason I'm coming on board is I hear you're thinking of working with a company I happen to have an interest in, Cambridge Analytica, and who happens to be willing to pay me a cash finder's fee if I can get you to sign them. Wow, no wonder I don't have to be paid. What an amazing arrangement that would be. Paul Manafort, Trump's campaign manager at the time, said that he knew nothing of Nix's cash offer, but gave Cambridge Analytica a limited contract, though he didn't see the need in deference to the Mercers. Later that summer, Manafort was forced to resign after the press reported his links to Ukrainian oligarchs. In the vacuum, the Mercers soon established control over the Trump campaign. Rebekah Mercer successfully pushed for a staff shakeup that led to the promotion of 3 people funded by the family. Bannon became the campaign's CEO, Conway its manager, and Bossy its deputy manager. William Crystal, the editor of the Weekly Standard and an adamant Trump opponent, warned it's the merger of the Trump campaign with the kooky right. But an email that Bannon sent to a friend in 2015, and that was later leaked to the Daily Beast, confirms that the elevation of the Mercers and their operatives was in many ways a formality. A year before Bannon joined Trump's campaign staff, he described himself in the email as Trump's de facto, quote, campaign manager because of the positive coverage that Breitbart was giving to Trump. That coverage had largely been underwritten, of course, by the Mercers. Brendan Fisher, a lawyer at the Campaign Legal Center, said that the Mercers' financial entanglement with the Trump campaign was bizarre and potentially illegal. The group has filed a complaint with the Federal Election Commission, which notes that at the end of the 2016 campaign, the super PAC run by the Mercers, by the Mercer-paid Glittering Steel, a film production company that shares an address in Los Angeles with Cambridge Analytica and Breitbart News. $280,000 supposedly for campaign ads attacking Hillary Clinton. Although Bannon was running Trump's campaign, Fisher said it appears to have paid him nothing. Meanwhile, the Mercers Super PAC made a payment of about $5 million to Cambridge Analytica, which was incorporated at the same address as Bannon's strategic advisors. Super PACs are legally required to stay independent of a candidate's campaign, but, Fisher said, it raises the possibility of the Mercers subsidizing Steve Bannon's work for the Trump campaign. It is, of course, absolutely exactly that. On December 3rd, the Mercer family hosted a victory celebration at Owl's Nest, a costume party with heroes and villains as its theme. Rebekah Mercer welcomed several hundred guests, including Donald Trump. In extemporaneous remarks, Trump thanked the Mercers, saying that they had been instrumental in bringing some organization to his campaign. He specifically named Bannon, Conway, and Bossy. Trump then joked that he just had the longest conversation of his life with Bob Mercer, and it was just 2 words. A guest at the party told me, I was looking around the room and I thought, no doubt about it, the people whom the Mercers invested in, my comrades, are now in charge. After the election, Rebekah Mercer was rewarded with a seat on Trump's transition team. She basically bought herself a seat, Fisher said. She said she had strong feelings about who should be nominated to cabinet positions and other top governmental jobs. Not all of her ideas were embraced. She unsuccessfully pushed for John Bolton, the hawkish former ambassador to the United Nations, to be named Secretary of State. So far, her suggestion that Arthur Robinson, the Oregon biochemist, be named the National Science Advisor has gone nowhere. Phew. Like her father, she advocates a return to the gold standard, but as of yet, she has failed to get Trump to appoint officials who share this view. It'll be interesting, too. I don't know how much money these billionaires would have left if they really had to account for it all with gold bullion. Still, Mercer made her influence felt. Her pick for National Security Advisor was Michael Flynn, and Trump chose him for the job. Flynn lasted only a month after he lied about having spoken with the Russian ambassador before taking office. More important, several people to whom Mercer is very close, including Bannon and Conway, have also become some of the most important and powerful figures in the world. Rebekah's father, meanwhile, can no longer be considered a political outsider. David Magerman, in his essay for the Inquirer, notes that Mercer, quote, has surrounded our president with his people, and his people have an outsized influence over the running of our country simply because Robert Mercer paid for their seats. He writes, everyone has a right to express their views. But he adds, when the government becomes more like a corporation, that sounds familiar, with the richest 0.001% buying shares and demanding board seats, then we cease to be a representative democracy. Instead, he warns, we become an oligarchy. So what'd you think of that? That's a single theme running throughout the entire show, and it's not even the theme I thought I was going to start with, but the Jane Mayer piece. It's quite a marathon read. I was glad to do it, glad to get it on record, and she always produces some fantastic work. And it's always pretty long, too, pretty involved, but it gives you a pretty full picture of things. I've got some other stuff to share with you. I know I've got to do a couple other recorded shows, possibly for Monday, probably for next Friday as well, just as we deal with spring break and the travel around it. I apologize. Don't want to leave you in the lurch, especially after all of your generous support came flowing in for our informal pledge drive to help fix the computers and get our microphones back online here for me, for Greg. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this deep dive as much as I enjoyed theorizing about it. There's some amazing information that's still out there, and that's not even the totality of what I have. I cut out a couple of Mercer articles. I don't know how much more Mercer reporting any of you guys can stand. We'll have, of course, the weekend in between now and the next round of it, but man, there's a lot. And then, of course, there's a lot of other interesting esoterica out there, too, that will tie into things. Anyway, have a great weekend. We hope we will, we'll see you back here next week. You'll hear my recorded voice on Monday.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
Thank you for listening. Thank you for indulging my curious interest in the Mercers and in Stephen Bannon. It's weird. It's not normal, as they say. Do stay tuned, though, of course, for the after show. Wink and Justice will bring you all the contemporaneous stories that I missed by concentrating on these guys today. Have a great week.